Hello and good morning. Holly Shields here live from Kalkine Studios in Sydney, and you're watching the early trades. Let's get started with our market open report. Australian shares have seesawed at the open, recovering from a loss to be trading just slightly higher in the first few minutes of the session. The S&P ASX 200 index is up 1.7 points or 0.02%. And Metcash was up 5.1% to $4.15, while Silver Lake Resources up as well 4.9% to $1.62. Then Ramelius Resources again was trading 3.8% higher at $8.51. Other stocks, Boral was up 2.1% to $6.30 after selling its North American fly ash business. But tech stocks were the ones hit hard. Zipco was down 4.4% to $4.62, while Afterpay dipped 4% similarly to $94.35, and Nearmap slid 2.9% to $1.46. Bapcor as well was down 3.5% to $6.55 after the board forced the early retirement of its chief executive. The ASX 200 tested two-month lows several times last week, but finished just 0.5% lower for the week trading. Trading volumes returned to normal after peaking on their third day of the Omicron sell-off. Defensive sectors appeared the best prospects following declines in US financials and miners space. BHP and Rio Tinto suffered heavy falls on Friday as copper and other industrial metals declined, and the Australian dollar slumped below 70 US cents. BHP's US listed stock shed 5.46%. Then its UK listed stock gave up 2.74% as Rio Tinto dropped 4.37% in the US and 3.02% in the UK. A bruising season for the Aussie dollar saw the local unit test 13-month lows as it fell past 69.92 US on Friday. Then this morning it was up just a tad, trading at 70.06 US cents. Although the Aussie is on the edge of dropping to an 18-month low after a horror session last week when it slid more than 1%. Then in other news, the Reserve Bank meets tomorrow to adjust its outlook to greater reflect inflationary pressures. The US Federal Reserve blinked last week, acknowledging for the first time that this period of elevated price rises may not be transitory. The Fed now appears likely to raise rates as soon as mid-2022 to stop the US economy from overheating. At its last meeting, the RBA scrapped its bond yield target and dropped a reference to 2024 as the earliest likely raise. However, the emergence of the Omicron variant may have given it a convenient excuse to sit pat during the last meeting of the year. Meanwhile, November job advertising figures were released today, and tomorrow brings weekly consumer confidence data as well, the service sector activity and house prices. RBA Governor Philip Lowe is due to deliver a speech at a virtual summit on Thursday. As for AGMs, this week's lineup includes Afterpay, which we'll see today, and then Bank of Queensland on Tuesday, Fonterra Shareholders Fund on Thursday, and Pendle Group and Washington H. Soul Pattinson on Friday. Plus, IGA operator Metcash releases its half-year earnings today as well. Before we look in more trending updates, let's take a short break.
Hi there, James Preston for Kalkine TV. Are you into gaming and virtual reality? Does AI and the endless possibilities it entails capture your interest? Or are you constantly trawling through the web to try and discover the latest updates and innovations in the tech space? Well, let us do the work for you. From the latest product launches to shocking affairs on the World Wide Web, exclusive interviews and information about the top companies like Apple and Google to brand new tech startups vying for your attention. Kalkine's Tech Beat has the latest in what matters in the world of technology. Join me every single Thursday on The Tech Beat, exclusive to Kalkine TV.
Welcome back to Kalkine TV. Let's take a look at the IPOs of today and for the rest of the week. Well, the market for initial public offerings has started to show possible signs of exhaustion. Several listings traded well below launch prices last week, and notable flops included Biome, listed at 20 cents, trading at 11 cents now, and Radiopharm Theranostics, listed at 60 cents, trading at 34.5 cents. This week's slate is light up. It starts with a triple header. Australian Bond Exchange Holdings listed today at 10:30 a.m. ABE describes itself as Australia's preeminent marketplace for investing in fixed income securities. Then Newmark Property REIT at 12 p.m. combined two unlisted property trusts, the Newmark Hardware Trust and Newmark Capital Property Trust. Then Ramelius Resources at 12:30 p.m. is a copper gold explorer with projects in Queensland, WA and New Zealand. The rest of the week will see American West Metals, Rocket Boots on Tuesday, the Hydration Pharmaceuticals Company, SE Advanced Materials on Thursday, and Panther Metals on Friday. Now for a look at the newsmakers, well, biotech giant CSL has lost a court challenge to overturn the US Customs and Border Protection Agency's decision to ban Mexican citizens from crossing to donate blood plasma. CSL and rival Spanish company Grifols SA teamed up in the lawsuit, which was filed in the District of Columbia in September, 3 months after the company shut the border to anyone deemed not essential. The process of blood plasma accounts for 85% of CSL's earnings, the balance coming from vaccines and antivenom. Then Magellan Financial Group's funds under management have risen by 1.4% in November. Total FUM rose from $114.8 billion, to $116.4 billion. And retail FUM dipped slightly to $30.2 billion from $30.3, while institutional FUM rose from $86.2 billion to $84.5. Meanwhile, Metcash has hiked its interim dividend by 31 cents after a strong first half of the new financial year, which saw strong sales and earnings across all pillars. The company's revenue rose 1.3% to $7.2 billion, while underlying EBIT climbed 13.9% to $231.2 million. Statutory profit rose 3% to $128.8 million, while underlying profit was up 13.1% to $146.6 million. And Sigma Healthcare has slashed its earnings guidance for the 2022 financial year, saying it now expects underlying EBITDA to be down around 10% compared with the previous year in September. The company said it had expected growth of 5% compared with the 2021 financial year. They now believe the downgrade reflected a challenging second half of the financial year, which has been impacted by a shorter-term operational issue resulting from the rollout of its Enterprise Resource Planning, or ERP. Meanwhile, Bapcor's board has brought forward the retirement date of Chief Executive and Managing Director Daryl Abotomy by nearly 3 months after a marked deterioration in the relationship between the outgoing boss and the board. The company had announced Mr. Abotomy's retirement on the 23rd of November and said it'll be in effect from the 28th of February in order to transition to a new company leader. Well, that's all for now on the early morning trades, but stay tuned to Kalkine TV because we have many more shows lined up for you today. This is Holly Shields signing off.